Hi there, I'm Jill and I'm here at Jill Lily Studio. Welcome to the sew along. We're going to be doing the Gracious Grove sew along, which is this quilt that's hanging behind me. And you gather all your supplies and we'll be ready to start. Let me show you some of the things that you're going to need. First of all, you're going to need a pattern. You can order the pattern on my website or find it at a quilt shop. We also have a PDF downloadable one if you need to, if you don't want the hard copy. And then you're of course going to need some fabrics, and I've got all the yummy fabrics here from my Grove collection. You're welcome to use whatever fabrics you want, but if you want to order a kit, I still have kits available. You can do that on my website. And then when we get to the applique blocks, which isn't for a little ways down the road, I think it's block 6 is when we start, week 6, you will need maker paper, which is my template paper that I use, and an applique set, which has all of the tools that I use in my applique method. And you'll also need a bias tape maker. So get all your supplies ordered so that you'll have them be ready for the applique part. You don't need these yet because we're going to get started with the piecing of the blocks first, and let's get started. Okay, I've opened up my pattern, and the pattern has on the very first page the cutting directions for the whole quilt. If you want to cut everything out at once, or maybe you've already done that, that's just fine. But if you'd prefer to cut just what you need for that block that week, you can do that. For instance, at the start of each block heading, this one is the setting blocks. It has a list of all the things you need to cut for that block we're working on. Then the next block, here's block number 1. That'll be next week, and you'll need to just cut those things that are listed under that block heading. So you can do it that way if you want. We're going to get started today on the setting blocks. Now the setting blocks are the blocks that go in between the main pieced blocks, these pretty pieced and applique blocks. The setting blocks are right here. Can you see that setting block? It's this one's all white. All of the triangles around it are white. On the edge, the setting block has the charcoal fabric in the edges. So there's a couple of versions, and the only difference is the fabric that you use. So we'll just follow those instructions and let's get started. You're going to need, for the setting blocks, just your green houndstooth, your white background, and your charcoal main print, okay? And cut your pieces and we'll get sewing. We're going to learn how to do a corner triangle. Many of you know this, but this is the basic construction method throughout the whole quilt, so we'll just demonstrate it. We're going to do the first step, which is to use a 2.5 by 4.5 white square rectangle and squares 2.5 inches of the black charcoal main print. Now I set this square right on top of my matching up the sides, and I'm going to sew from corner to corner just like it says, like it shows in the diagram. What the pattern asks you to do is to take a pencil or a pen and draw a line from the corner to corner of the black square, and that will give you a line to sew on. But rather than drawing that line, I have put a line on my sewing machine bed that I can follow instead. So I'll slide this end under the sewing machine needle with the needle right in the corner of that little square, and then you can see that I could sew in any angle, so I'm going to make sure that this point is right on the edge of my center line. So I'm going to watch right here as it's feeding into the machine. It's putting that point right on the center line and giving me a diagonal sew line. I'm going to put this here and do the next one, and I can keep chaining them all the way through. Now make sure you don't orient it the wrong way because you'll have the corner triangle on the wrong side. So just make sure you check with your pattern, lay it out the same way, orient the pieces the same way, and then stitch right on that diagonal line from corner to corner as you go down. Okay, now we're going to go trim these. Okay, now I've brought my piece to the cutting board because I want to take off the extra fabric that I've got here. When we flip this, we've sewn it on the diagonal there, and when we flip it open like that, that's going to create our corner triangle on our base piece. But we have to trim off this seam allowance. So I turn it around and I just eyeball it, just whack it off, and leave about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You don't have to, you can measure it if you want and use a ruler, but I don't. Okay, so now we've trimmed that seam allowance off, and we're going to just press that open got my iron here, and I'll just push this edge open until I use a little bit of steam until I get a nice flat piece now. Now my corner triangle is all ready, and this piece I wanted to press the seam toward the black. And you could go ahead and prepare all of those. Okay, the next step is to make these little pieces with corner triangles on them, and I did it the same way, feeding it through my sewing machine, sewing along the diagonal between the corners. And this one has you add 2 corners on so that you create that. So you add 2 white corners on this, and some of them are black. It tells you how many. We're just going to trim off that seam allowance. Let me pull in my pressing mat here, and then I'm going to press these open, and that will give me a nice little block that has the 2 corners replaced. Now I wanted to show you cutting these when I've got them chained together. Here's a chain. Now some of them in the pattern, it will tell you how many to do that have a black corner on one side and a white corner on the opposite side. So you do some of them that have the black corners and some of them that have both whites, and then I'll take those to my cutting mat in with the whole chain put together. Just leave it chained together, and then I'll just run my blade down and cut all of them off at once. Cutting, trimming, trimming, trimming. And then I can take this, I'll trim the other side, and then I have to pull them apart. So you can cut them apart, or you can get some little scissors. But once they're apart, then you're going to go sew to your pressing mat and press those open like that. Okay, now we've created these units that we can use to put a quarter of a block together. And I've laid them out like in step 3 of your block. So you have your little, your small piece and your rectangle with your corner triangles on it. So you're going to sew these together, sew these 3 together, and these 2 together, and then put those rows together, and that will create a quarter of the block. You need to make 32 of those. Okay, so that was step 3, and for step 4, you lay out the same components, but substitute a charcoal square here and a charcoal rectangle here, and that will give you the other quarter blocks, and you need to make 40 of these. Okay, here's the first block that you are working on. This is the quarter block. Can you see that? And you put 4 quarters together to create this setting block. And then this other setting block is the one that has the charcoal edges, and you're going to use 2 of the ones that we made second that had the charcoal pieces in it, and 2 of the white ones that we made in step 3. That should go down a little bit like that, and that will create this other setting block. So you have a bunch of setting blocks to do, and next week we'll start with sewing the blocks. Next week we're going to sew this block. That's block number 1, and it's just 1 block each week after this. So if this is too much for you to do in 1 day or 1 week, just kind of space it out and get it done as we go along. We're going to be sewing along for a few weeks together, so I look forward to your comments, and if you have any questions, feel free to message me or send a message on Instagram, and we'll make sure we get that taken care of for you. All right, watch on the blog every week. It will be at jalilistudioblog.com, and that's where you'll find the instructions for each week's assembly. Good luck, happy quilting, bye-bye.